Hey everyone, this is Seth Blaustein. I'm one of the founders of Voice and Exit. And today we're going to do a follow-up with TK Coleman, who is one of our seed speakers at the 2014 festival in Austin. Now, TK, aside from being a friend of mine, is a philosopher, writer, entrepreneur, and education director for an incredible startup called Praxis. And Praxis is disrupting education, but not exactly in the sense you may be thinking through some elaborate technology. Praxis is cognitively disrupting the way that we conceive of education. And they do this by creating opportunities for young people to work with startups to gain real-world, first-hand experience in an area of interest. This offers students an opportunity and a potential exit, really, from the university path for something better. And it kind of views education through an entrepreneurial lens. It's a really cool program that I definitely encourage you to check out, especially if you're considering going to college or not going to college. When I look at Praxis, I can't help but think of the guilds of the Renaissance, where most of the luminaries didn't really come from formalized institutions of education, but were in a sort of apprentice master program. And an interesting book, actually, I read recently was The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle, which talks a little bit about the social structure during the Renaissance and how it gave rise to so much incredible talent, which is just bubbling out. So, in TK's Seed Talk, he challenges us to re-examine what education means and take on a more entrepreneurial lens when thinking about education. So we're going to dive a little deeper into these ideas now. So welcome, TK. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Seth. It's a pleasure, man.
Yeah. So I wanted to open this up by exploring a little bit about what education means to you, because people sort of throw around education. Some people see it as a noun that you put inside someone's head. Other people look at it as a verb. So how do you kind of think about education? What does that word mean to you?
Yeah, I try to understand education in a way that is flexible enough to allow for the possibility of all those things, right? Because what education means to one person might mean something different, to another. But this is interesting that you ask this now, because just last night I was listening to some old Earl Nightingale broadcast, and he gave a definition of success that I haven't heard before, but he said that success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And I really like that. And if I could piggyback off that definition, I'd say that for me, the purpose of education is to develop the knowledge and the skills that help people achieve success as described by that definition. And for me, that involves a couple of different things. I mean, for one, it involves helping people learn how to think clearly, critically, and creatively about what they want. There's a really excellent book by Robert Fritz called The Path of Least Resistance, where he dedicates an entire chapter to thinking clearly about what you want, identifying what it is you desire, what matters most to you, and how difficult of a process this can become, because there are so many different social forces that alienate us from the experience of true desire and sort of complicate unnecessarily this process of just being able to tap into that basic intuitive knowledge we all have of what feels right for you, what feels good to you, what's desirable, what's attractive, and so forth. And so I look at education as helping people think about that and helping them understand information within the context of achieving and attracting the results that matter most to them. So here's a couple of examples. One, I had a friend in college who played football, and I remember we all went out one time and we were just hanging out at Pizza Hut, and he just sort of sat there smiling, laughing, joking around, participating in the conversation like everyone else, but he didn't touch the food that we were eating. And I said, hey, man, like, why aren't you having a good time? Why aren't you, eating the food? He goes, oh, I'm having a good time. He was like, I just don't eat this kind of food. And I was like, why not, man? And he said, well, because I play football and, I want to stay in shape and I want my body to be in top condition. And I said to him, I go, man, like, that must stink, right? Like you're not really free to kind of have fun because of football. And he was like, nah, there are really two different kinds of freedom. There's the freedom to do whatever it is that you want. And then there's also this kind of freedom that you experience as the power to do the things that really, really matter to you. And he was like, I guess you could say, in one sense, I'm not free to eat pizza and enjoy the fun of that. But in a different sense, I'm free to do things on the football field that a lot of my friends can't do. And that kind of freedom is what really matters to me. And I think that's a good story because it illustrates the fact that a lot of the things that we try to teach people, things like discipline, character, solid work ethic, a lot of the, a lot of the things we try to impart into people's heads about right and wrong. Most of these things are things we naturally get when we have a sense of purpose. I remember hearing a guy, Miles Monroe, say that the root of man's frustrations is his misconception of self. When you don't know who you are, when you don't know what you want, it doesn't really matter how many moral codes we give you, how much advice we give you, how much information we give you. We're just going to make you more intelligent at being unhappy, more intelligent at ruining your life, more intelligent at making things unnecessarily complicated. So I think a good education ought to help facilitate experiences that help people discover who they are and who they want to be in the world. Here's another example. So I used to live with a guy who has a few kids, and every year they would come visit, and he had a daughter. And whenever his daughter came, I would allow her to have my room, and I would sleep, in the living room with the guy. And it was a small inconvenience to me, but I didn't really mind that much. I felt like it was the right thing to do. So when I come home from work, the kids would all be sitting on the couch, playing video games, watching TV, whatever. And I'd say hi to them, and the guys would all be like, "Hi, TK," and the girl, she'd just be like, "Eh." And, she was sort of at that age where, things were kind of funny anyway. And she did this like a few days in a row. So one day I pulled her aside and I said, "Hey, look," I said, "I don't know if you don't like me or if that's just your personality or anything like that, but that doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is that you're someone who gets the things you need and want out of life. That's what's most important to me because I care about you. And I want to explain something to you. You're staying with us for a full week, and I gave up my room so that you can have privacy, so that you can have that. And I know that's something that you enjoy, and I feel good about doing it. I don't want you to feel guilty about the fact that I do this for you. I don't mind doing it. But I want you to understand, this isn't something that I have to do. It's something that I do because I actually like you. I actually care about you. I actually want you to have a good time. Now, think about it for a moment, what the experience must be like for me when I walk into a room and I say hi to everyone. Everyone greets me with a smile and says my name, and you don't even look at me and you just sort of grunt. Like, it makes me feel like a total loser. And I don't want you to feel guilty about that because I'm going to let you have my room no matter what, okay? I'm not going to turn on you. But in the real world, there are things you're going to want out of life, and there are people that have the power to help you. And a big part of what affects people's desire to help you is your ability to build rapport with them, your ability to harmoniously coexist with them. So even if you don't like me, even if you're in a bad mood, I think it would be good if you just start practicing right now what it's like and what it takes to get people on your team. So maybe just fake it. When I walk in, you don't have to feel good about me on the inside. You don't have to get a warm, fuzzy feeling when I walk through the door. But when I say hi, give me some eye contact and say, "What's up, TK?" That's it. That's all I need. I don't need a full conversation. If you learn that simple skill, it'll make you so much better at getting along with people, getting people on your side, and helping you get the things you want out of life. I said, "You understand what I'm saying?" And she was like, "I understand." Next day I came in, "Hi, kids. Hey, TK. Now, someone may look at that story and say, "Well, you still didn't change her on the inside, TK. Maybe she still doesn't like you." Well, I know that she likes me, but when I go to the grocery store and I pay my money to the cashier, I'm not even sure if that guy likes me. That's not the point. I don't care if he likes me or not. What matters is that we're able to harmoniously coexist. We're able to interact with one another and get what we need out of the transaction without encroaching on one another's freedom, without disrespecting one another, without creating unnecessary complication. I think that's a good illustration for the following, that a good educational process is one that helps you think about information in a way that's connected to a sense of purpose, in a way that relates to what you want. And I think it's so easy to get people to make changes in their behavior if you can give them that self-knowledge, if you can give them that sense of behavior, if you can give them that sense of purpose. Half of the lessons we feel that it's so important to teach people, they get it automatically when they have that. A second component, too, that I think every education should include is a philosophy of work. I think this is a huge part of it. Helping people develop a rich, robust philosophy of work. No matter who you are, chances are you're going to have to do something for a living. And it doesn't matter to me what your basis for that is. If all you want to do is think about money, that's your choice. If all you want to do is think about what feels good and you don't care about money, that's your choice. What's important is that you don't go into that process unconsciously on autopilot, that you don't treat your job, that you don't treat your professional life as something that you do just because this is what human beings have been doing for a long time, but that you be very deliberate in the process of thinking about what role do you want money to play in your life? What role do you want work to play in your life? Like, what does a job mean to you? And like what role do you want that to play? Like, there are some people who believe you should follow your passion, and there are some people who criticize that idea. I don't care which side of the debate you're on, but I want you to be aware of that, and I want you to think critically about that. So developing a philosophy of work and helping people develop the self-knowledge and the skills necessary for this concept of success we talked about, the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. That would be, in a nutshell, my philosophy of education.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I love that threading education to a process of self-discovery, of purpose. That is really where we derive so much meaning through our life experiences, is getting some clarity, even if it changes from one year to the next, on what our purpose is. And, you know, in a lot of ways, I mean, Voice and Exit is about pioneering. It's about being that confident problem solver that's willing to think for themselves. And so it's really important to me. And I think people are kind of waking up to how, at least in the U.S., how the public schooling system has a little bit been this kind of top-down, perspective about not so much about nurturing purpose and self-discovery, but about feeding information that was relevant to the workforce at the time. And people are starting to kind of see that top-down system, while it may have been relevant at the time, is no longer relevant. And we're starting to see these sorts of organizations and changes that are disrupting the way we perceive education and actually behave as educators to empower the new kind of paradigm that we're actually in. So how do you see that shift kind of playing out right now? Do you see the same kind of transition happening?
I do. And, there are a lot of interesting things going on in the world right now that are really changing the game. I mean, even look at politically the discussion that's happening right now with President Obama and the changes he's looking to make college more affordable. And this is already happening without him. Whether he gets involved in this in the way he says he wants to or not, the fact of the matter is a degree is more easy to obtain than it has ever been. And it's becoming a commodity that is no longer able to sell itself on the basis of rarity, that my degree is valuable because not a lot of people have it, or because it says something really special about me. And more people are going to realize that their ability to survive and thrive in the economy is going to be based on their capacity to solve problems, on their capacity to create perceived value for others. And this has really always been the case, but the degree has always been the primary signal for a person's capacity to do that. And now the signaling power of that degree is starting to weaken, especially as people have so many alternative ways of themselves, showing that they have the ability to do certain things. A good example of this outside of, in theater, if you take a look at Hollywood, if you want to see an actor, the traditional way for so long has been to try to get an agent. And once you get an agent, hopefully that agent can get you an audition for the kinds of shows or commercials that you want to be on. And then once they get you an audition, hopefully you can book, and then the agent gets a cut from your money. But there's no way really to make a career if you don't have an agent. You have to go through that system. But now we live in an age where people are getting television shows. People are making money because they have their own YouTube shows. They have their own podcasts. We live in the age of the self-created celebrity. So there's an alternative way for people to signal their ability to act, their ability to sing, their ability to do comedy or whatever it may be. And people are going straight to these sources now to find talent. I just read an article yesterday about a car commercial where it was based on a video that went viral, where a woman was in the car, in the passenger seat. The song by Salt and Pepper, None of Your Business, was on the radio. And she's just rapping, and she didn't realize that her husband was secretly recording her on the cam phone. He put it up on YouTube. It was the funniest, cutest thing. And the whole thing went viral. And these producers for this car commercial reached out to her, and she couldn't get the the clearance that she needed to come to America to do it. She's in Canada, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So they came out to Toronto to be where she is and film this commercial. And you see this sort of thing happening more and more. And a lot of artists are deliberately seeking out these alternative means of letting the world know they're out there. But that's just a reflection of something that's happening at a broader level. That's not just with the entertainment industry. We live in a world now where people's capacity to signal their abilities, it's growing, and new ways of doing this are coming into existence every day. And now your ability to make it is going to depend not on being able to say, hey, I went to this institution or I studied at this school. It's going to be able to say, it's going to be based on your ability to say, hey, here's a body of work that proves I can come in and create value from day one. Here's a body of work and a following attached to it that shows there are people that are listening to me right now. There are people whose lives I'm changing right now. And I think the future of education is one in which these realities are acknowledged. And we're teaching people not to depend on institutions to signal their ability, but we're teaching people how to create their own signals.
Yeah, I like that. And so, you know, thinking back to your seed talk, you sort of reference a little bit about this transition that we're making and what it really means in terms of how we execute in education. And you use the phrase, an entrepreneurial pedagogy, and that developing an entrepreneurial pedagogy is something that can support this transition from more of the kind of top-down, here's how school works, here's what you need to learn, to the more bottom-up, you need to be a self-creator and be a independent problem solver. And so how do you sort of see in entrepreneurial pedagogy, what form could that take? What might that look like?
Yeah, so there's a philosophical side to it and a practical side. So philosophically, there's a certain kind of attitude that an entrepreneurial pedagogy helps facilitate. Part of that attitude is one of taking personal responsibility for the results you create in your life. One of my favorite sayings is that there's no refund for regret. That if you listen to someone give you advice on how you ought to live your life, you follow that advice, it doesn't work out, and you're miserable because of it, your advisor doesn't have the ability to magically jump inside of your body and live out the consequences of your decision. At the end of the day, the consequences of your decision rest on you. And you're responsible for what you make of your life. And even if it is someone else's fault, like even if you wanted to be a Broadway choreographer and someone said, that's stupid, Seth, don't do that. You should move to Iowa and you should work at a restaurant and be a manager there. Even if they gave you bad advice and it's their fault, at the end of the day, you're the one that has to live your life. So taking ownership of your experiences, taking ownership of what you create, not putting it off on anyone else, not saying that, it's what my professor told me to do. It's what this institution told me to do. It's what my parents told me to do. But realizing that you have ownership of your life, and whether you like it or not, you're going to have ownership of the consequences of your choices. I think that attitude is critical, and it's important that we create experiences that help cultivate it. Another aspect of it philosophically is emphasizing the importance of learning through failure. Chalmers Brothers has an excellent book called Language and the Pursuit of Happiness. And there's a chapter in there devoted to learning. And he says, learning is the process of figuring out how to do something while you can't do it. Process of doing something at the same time that you're unable to do it. So for instance, when I was in high school and I was trying out for the basketball team, I remember the coach had us do these figure 8 dribbling drills, and everyone was doing a really good job, putting the basketball through their legs and so forth. And the coach got upset and he says, if you're not messing up, you're not doing it right. And the idea there is that you're not growing unless you're pushing yourself beyond the boundaries of what you're comfortable doing. And messing up, having failure is the best indication that you're pushing yourself in the way you need to push yourself so that you can grow. And so having those attitudes is key. Taking ownership of your choices and embracing failure as a key to learning. Practically, this means actually getting out there and doing things, but not just doing things, but doing things in a particular kind of way, specifically in a way that involves an accountability structure. Like something that's essential to entrepreneurship is making money, doing it for the money. And this is something that has been demonized. This is something that's often looked at as like selfish and greedy. And people who don't do things for the money are kind of glorified and made to look like angels or what have you. And people who do, like, oh, you don't care about society. But there are lessons you can learn by doing things for the money that you simply can't get any other way. One of the weaknesses of traditional education is that we evaluate people's performance according to a standard that doesn't perfectly mirror the realities they're going to have to face when they go out into the real world. In the real world, my ability to succeed depends on my capacity to create perceived value for a targeted audience, or my ability to solve problems for a niche market. And that's possible even if a professor or a group of professors don't like what I do. So the standards that determine success and competence in the real world, where you're going to have to live, where you're going to have to survive, are very different than the standards of success in academia. And that doesn't mean that the academy standards of success are bad. It just means there are certain kinds of lessons that you only learn when you do something for the money. So I always tell people that even if you have a skill that you want to do for free just because you love it, as an experiment, you should do it for the money at least one time, just because you're going to discover something about yourself when you have to attach a price tag to what you do. And not only that, you're going to discover something about yourself when you're accountable to something other than your own feelings of inspiration. It's very difficult when you have a customer that you're bound to please, and you can't simply go, well, I like it. It felt good. Like, it's a very different sort of thing. So I think that's a key part of an entrepreneurial pedagogy, getting people to learn by doing and getting them to test their ideas out within an accountability structure where they have to create value for other people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I hear in there also is it's got this, kind of fail forward perspective that entrepreneurs have, is that you learn through doing things even when you're not necessarily ready to do them. You launch, you iterate, you change, you adapt. That's sort of the process of life, that there's no answer that you can find to start with that just gets you there. It's a process. Growth is sort of sometimes a struggle. And so I like seeing that overlap between, entrepreneurship as that fail forward and be okay with failing mindset, tying into education, because in a lot of ways we don't really do that, right? I mean, we sort of we sort of demonize failure in a lot of ways, that your test is your test results in school are sort of the measure of success. And failure is something that should be dramatically avoided. And so I see that absolutely. And so what I hear is cultivating an attitude, more than any one particular thing, is cultivating an attitude of being okay with going out there and trying something, even when you're not quite maybe prepared to do it. So if you were to kind of boil it down into like one thing that someone could really change if they want to take on this entrepreneurial lens that you're kind of referencing, what would it be? And I'll give you one example. For me, when I got out of high school, I sort of stopped and like scratched my head and turned around. I said, "What the hell just happened for the last 12 years?" And I was going into this world where now I'm on my own. Now I have to create my own path, and it was empowering. But nothing I had done over the last 12 years had really prepared me for that mindset. It was more a mindset of, find the answers. There's some expert who has them. They're usually at the front of the classroom. And so you're sort of left with these, cobwebs of a certain mindset that's not entrepreneurial. So if you're that person in that position who's still got this kind of mindset, ingrained, where do you start? What kind of practical things do you think someone could do to begin cultivating an attitude of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, the first thing I would say, and I'm going to figure out a way to work this into anything I ever talk about, because it's just a part of my open agenda, is you got to read, and I know there are a lot of different philosophies about the importance of reading, and I've heard all the guys who talk about, book knowledge and how reading doesn't get it done. And that's fine. Everyone's got their way of thinking. But if you're looking for my opinion, one of the first things I'm going to tell you is read. Reading is one of the best ways to overcome what I call intellectual solipsism. The experience of being caved in by your own limited ways of looking at the world. Like, if you want to learn how to think entrepreneurially, read things that have been written by other entrepreneurs. Like, read things that have been written by people that are out there changing the world. And you can start with books like Peter Thiel's 0 to 1, things like that. Books that challenge you to sort of step outside of your box. I think the second thing is it's important to do things in public. I talk to a lot of writers who have all sorts of fears and concerns about being misunderstood or being criticized or not being ready yet. And it's funny because I heard one guy say to a friend of mine, I want to write, but I'm afraid that if I share my opinions, people are going to attack me and, it'll be a big controversy and I'll be on CNN and they'll be hating what I said. And my friend says, just try to get heard first. You'd be lucky if you wrote something and the world paid attention to you enough to actually hate you for what you write. There's something very humbling about doing what you want to do in public, whether it's writing, whether it's singing, whether it's running. There's something humbling about announcing to the world you're going to do it and doing it in a venue where you can be observed, where you can be misunderstood, where you can be criticized, where you can be ignored. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about your craft when you do things in public. So find a way to do something so that you can be ignored or criticized or hated or misunderstood, because it's only real when you do it at that level. It's only then that your brain is going to take it seriously and start processing information in a way that helps you get better in a way that matters. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So get out there and kind of act. It's sort of acknowledging fear and just going ahead anyways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So if we were to kind of take this transition, this perception of transition, or this perception of education transition, and look into the future, what do you see as sort of being the status quo for kids graduating high school 10 years from now? Will college still be a thing to do, or how do you see that the future of education, from where we are now?
Yeah, this is interesting because, when I talk with people around the world about praxis, people question me on college a lot. They want to know what my stance on college is. Am I against college? Do I think it's going to continue to exist in the future? And, I tell people that when you love something, that's when you're most critical of it, because you want to see that thing realize its full potential. And I love college. I'm one of those people out there that has a romantic affinity for the academy. Mm-hmm. And I love college so much that I'm willing to criticize it. And I think there are certain things that colleges do really well. And I want to see colleges focus on those things and outsource the things that they're just not capable of doing as well. And my vision for the future, something that I not only want to happen, but something that I genuinely believe will happen, is I believe that colleges will begin to scale back. I don't think we're ever going to see colleges go out of existence, but I think we're going to start seeing colleges focus on the experiences they're capable of uniquely creating. We're going to see colleges serve a specific niche market, because there really are people out there who benefit from a college education and who ought to go to college. But we're also going to see more trade schools, more apprenticeships, more institutions like Praxis and Uncollege and places like this. We're going to see more things like the Teal Summit, where people have alternatives where they can pursue, a well-rounded education, but also be trained in specific areas that relate to their passions and, their interests and so forth. So I think the status quo in the future, I think when people graduate high school, and that's another conversation, by the way, but when people graduate high school, I think people will ask themselves, all right, based on what I want to do I want to go to college? Do I want to go to trade school? Do I want to go to an apprenticeship? And a lot of these things already exist, but we're just getting to the place where people are starting to see the necessity of them. And so there's sort of like a renaissance of the apprenticeship. By the way, Robert Greene in the book Mastery talks about this. It's a book I recommend anyone to read if they want to understand more about the value of apprenticeships.
Great book.
Also, really excellent book. Also, one more thing that I think will change. If you look at the way education is oriented now, K through 12, the common assumption is that the purpose of education is to prepare kids for college. That's what everyone's doing. Everyone's facilitating experiences that will help kids improve their chances of getting into a great college. And the assumption is once we get them into college, they will be all right. College will sort of take care of them from there, and give them whatever else they need, and then they'll go out into the real world. And I think that we're going to see changes in K through 12 as well. And I think the philosophy of ed there, that assumption that the purpose of education is to prepare people for college, I think you have more educators and philosophers and influential entrepreneurs who are challenging that notion. And I think we're going to start to see that crumble a little bit. And this broader perspective we're talking about taking root and people starting to think like this really early on, man.
That's awesome. That's exciting to hear that. Absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey's, one of his principles of begin with the end in mind. So and I'm kind of a practical idealist, I like to think, and that's having an ideal that may seem far-fetched now, but what are the practical steps to actually move towards that? So if you were to envision, a begin with the end in mind future for what education might look like in the future, what are we seeing? What does it look like? What is that experience like? Maybe 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now. What would you envision?
Oh, man, I think about that. There's a phone commercial. I don't know if it's Samsung. I don't know who it is, but you see this group of people standing outside of the Apple store, and they're waiting for the latest phone. And this guy comes by with just like this amazing piece of technology, and all the people in line are looking at him like, wow, what is that? And then the commercial says the next big thing is already here. And and you got all these people waiting in line to see when it's going to come. Well, hey, man, at the risk of sounding arrogant, I'll say the next big thing is already here. What we're doing with Praxis is the future. Like I said in our video, we're pioneers of the inevitable. We're not creating something new. We're recognizing where the world is headed, what's necessary to survive in the future, and we're just meeting that need now. And like anything new, there's going to be initial skepticism about it. We ask questions about things that are new that we never ask about things that have been around for a long time. And that's not because we're all stupid idiots who don't know how to think rationally. It's because when things have been around for a long time, it's pretty much a safe assumption that they must have done something right, and we probably don't need to scrutinize it as much. But when things are new, we tend to, be very sort of skeptical about it. So, for instance, I'm asked a lot, like, well, what do you guys do with the money that you make? And I'm more than happy to answer that question. But I'd love for someone to ask that about universities. I'd love for someone to probe into where the money goes for traditional education and ask themselves if they think that's an efficient use of funds. But that's another topic. But I think the next big thing is already here, man. I think like what we're doing with Praxis is we're actually rooting the educational process in real world experience, where we're pairing up our participants with real businesses where they're not just going to go work an entry level position where, they're given basic tasks to do and someone's going to keep them busy for 10 months and they get to say, I worked at this company. But it's an actual apprenticeship where they're actually being mentored by, the management team for these small to mid-sized growing dynamic businesses. And they're being taught about the nuts and bolts of being a business owner. They're learning how to think entrepreneurially by being around entrepreneurs and doing entrepreneurial work. And not only that, at the same time, they're getting a solid academic education where every week they're interacting with different professors, different entrepreneurs, and they're challenged to think about a lot of traditional subjects like philosophy and economics in a way that's centered around the pursuit of being a better person and a better professional. So I think education in the future, in 10 years, it looks like Praxis, but better.
I love it. Praxis 1.0, the future of education.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome, TK. Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. The talk was amazing. Loved being able to dig a little bit deeper here. It was a lot of fun, man. We could talk for hours.
Oh, man, it's a lot of fun. Let's do it again sometime, man.
Sounds good. All right, man. Take care.